Let's start at the ground level. This is what I call a high risk job. What do you think about when you think of this ground level operator?
Well, you're doing the work, and by work, I mean you're doing all the work, including the operational work. You're not leveraged. You're trading time for money, which is the definition of having a job. High risk because if you're working for somebody else, they're obligated to pay you. No matter how well it's going. If you're working for yourself, there's no such obligation, and frequently you're the one who doesn't get paid. So, and it's a high risk because in the trades or the construction and the areas we talk about, oftentimes if you're driving a truck and metaphorically handling a shovel, that works until your back goes out and then you're done. You either quit or you move on up the hierarchical ladder. And it's better to move up that hierarchy before you have to than as a result of an accident.
Yeah. And I don't want to poo-poo on this too much. There are ways of being a ground level operator and still being extremely successful if you approach it the right way. Like, for example, if you're the only person in your business, you have excellent margins, you charge a premium, you operate extremely lean, and you use your money to invest in other things. I've seen this happen before where there's a really talented plumber who does things on their own. They've got their own vehicle. They own everything they operate with, and they do it themselves. And then they take their extra money and they use that to invest in real estate. And they do that for 30 years. You can still do that and be successful. Yes, it's high risk.
Sure.
Yes, you're relying upon only yourself, but if you make that conscious decision and you know the game that you're playing and what's required to really succeed at that game, you can be a ground level operator. But that's just not the most common thing that we see.
Only thing I add to that is that guy's a real estate agent.
Exactly.
I mean, not an agent. He's a real estate business.
That's the game he's playing.
Yeah.
And he recognizes
it's different. It's a different business. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but if you're not running at high profit margins, if you're just relying on the jobs you're doing to be your paycheck and to keep you, alive today and not necessarily for tomorrow and retirement and all that stuff, that's not really where you want to be. Go and work for somebody else and get the 401k plan and don't have the risk of, your back going out, not being able to get disability insurance and whatever it is, workman's comp, right? So that's, there are advantages if you do it the right way to staying at that ground level. You don't have to worry about people. There's a little bit less stress with dealing with people. You can control everything. You set your schedule. But with that freedom and those advantages comes a lot of responsibility, a lot of risk that you're subjecting yourself to. So, I bet there's a lot of people listening at that ground level know the game that you're playing. Let's jump to the 10,000 foot level. I think there's going to be probably a lot of our listeners will be in these next two stages. So what does that jump look like? When you think of 10,000 foot level, what's happening with that operator?
Well, paralleling our evolution of a business owner, the 10,000 foot level is you hire somebody to help you.
Yeah.
Right. You're still going out on the jobs, but you've got a helper. Maybe that helper can actually go do one job while you're doing another, that kind of thing. So you're beginning to get leveraged. Theoretically, you're making money off of somebody else's effort. So you charge more to work that person than you pay that person. So you're making money on that. It's a good phase to pass through because you're going to learn so much, what it takes to manage people, how to give clear instructions, delegation, the fact that people don't always show up, the best laid plans of mice and men after gang of glee, as Robert Burns says, it doesn't quite work out the way you thought. And so you wind up with more work because you have one or two people and then they don't show up and now you're doing more work. So it can be great. It can be wonderful. But when you hire people, it is a complicating freaking factor. End of discussion. And, sometimes it works out really well and sometimes it doesn't. But you will face those challenges of how to efficiently use other people's time and talents to your benefit. So it definitely fits the bill of you have to do more work before you do less work. But
Yeah.
as you're going through 10,000, Winston Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know that 10,000 feet is always hell, but if you're going through 10,000 foot level, keep going, because generally that's not where you want to get stuck. I mean, you
Yeah.
might get a perfect person you can work with for 30 years, whatever, but that's typically not what happens.
Yeah. I was trying to think of, like on the ground level, I tried to make a case for here's how you would stay there, right? Like kind of a strategy potentially. And the 10,000 foot's a really hard one, because you're not operating as lean as you possibly could, probably because you have people around you and you're paying, now your labor costs become extreme. You probably want to keep going or remove yourself from that model, right? I think with this one, I think it's important that we defined, because we're going to mention this a few times, but define what a key man is. And this goes back to even your analogy or your story at the beginning of your friend who owned a supply house and nobody knew who he was. He wasn't a key man. If he was removed from that operation, it would still be operating most likely, right? And when you're a key man, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just you, it could be a person that you've hired where everything's riding on that person, because there's a silo in your business where only they know how things are done or where things are located or how to do things the way that they need to for this client. They are the only one with the skill set required for the role that you've created in the business that is able to speak 5 languages and be an engineer and do the actual construction and be a influencer on social media, right? Like this unicorn of a person. That is what's making you the key man, where you're really not replaceable to a certain extent. And when you're at that 10,000 foot level, you're really operating on a hub spoke management where you are the hub and you've hired support for all the different areas to keep the wheel moving. And you are still that key person that's the hub. So I think that's a really crucial thing to identify as, if you're the key person, you're managing people, but they're really just supporting you. You're really in operations at a core level. You're helping with everything that keeps the business going. You're on jobs. You're trying to push through and get more revenue. That's really what you're at that 10,000 foot level. So yeah, I think you're learning delegation, you're learning accountability, you're learning the importance of systems, you're learning the necessity of software to run your business, but you're still involved in everything. So definitely a difficult place to be, and probably making that decision of, man, do I just want to go back to the ground level? Do I want to go work for somebody else? Or how am I going to get to that 20,000 foot or even 30,000 foot level?
We talk about it in the evolution of a business owner, but we call this the push through stage. Um, I'm thinking actually of a couple of companies where you have an owner and a long term sidekick, Tonto and the Lone Ranger kind of deal, and they're doing great,
Yeah.
But that's just an anomaly, right? So, but generally, you want to. I have heard more people tell me, many people, I'll just say many people tell me, I made more money when it was just me.
Yep.
I'm going to fire everybody and sell those trucks and go back to doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And it's true. They made more money when it was just him or her. But you need to decide, because if you go back, you're back to you're not leveraged. It's a high risk job. If you hurt your back, you're out of business. If you don't have a plan like buying that real estate, like you're talking about, then it's, what's the future there? So you have to decide, am I going to go back or going to push through? And I like to see people, it's their own decision. Because if they're not committed to pushing through, then maybe they do need to go back.
Yeah.
But I like to see people decide to go through. And then we start talking about what does it take to get to the next, what are we at, 20,000 square feet, 20,000 feet elevation.